Hello, my photography friends. I hope you're having an awesome day. Now, today we're going to dive into the stunning world of Wolfgang Gangel's photography. And if you're looking for some inspiration, how to use shape, shadow, and a whole load of other ideas in your photographs to elevate them to the next level, then you are in for a rare treat. How's it? My name is Alex. I've been a professional portrait photographer for the last 30 years. And when I've looked at Wolfgang's photographs, they immediately jumped out because he absolutely nails some of the techniques that we can use in our own photography, no matter if you are a portrait photographer, a street photographer, or a landscape photographer. And I'm going to show you how you can incorporate these ideas into your own photography. Before we jump into that, just a quick thank you to Frames Magazine, which is where I found the work of Wolfgang Gangel. What an awesome name that is, but more about them later on. Wolfgang's photographs aren't just really about, sort of capturing a moment or telling a visual story or what have you, but I tend to see them as a wonderful example of how you can have technical skills and creative vision and then bring them together to produce something truly extraordinary. It's not really enough just to be technically competent or to have, great artistic vision. You need a way to combine those skills. So by breaking down these photographs, looking at what he's doing, we can get a better handle on how to apply this melding of great ideas and technique in our own photographs. The first thing that really jumps out at me when I looked at Wolfgang Gangel's photographs, and I do love that name, I'm going to keep saying it, right, is his perfect demonstration of how you can use really dramatic lighting and, importantly, shadows, really overlooked aspect of photography, to completely transform an image. So when you strategically put light sources, to highlight specific areas of the photographs and embrace those shadows, it adds a lot of contrast and depth to your photographs. I believe that a lot of photographers, when they're learning, the skill of taking photographs, are consumed with this idea of having detail in the shadows, detail in the highlights, and a whole range of tones in between. But when you take a page from Wolfgang's book and start experimenting with these minimal light setups, right, then you end up having to, by sheer nature of what you're doing, embrace the shadows, those dark, deep aspects in the photographs. And that's a huge leap into creating something that's a little bit more dramatic, a little bit more compelling. We look at this photograph here of this lady with this big paper. I suppose it's a rough, really, isn't it? Look how that completely stands out because of what Wolfgang is doing here. He has the shadows. So the form of the lady is completely black. And it's not just your screen that's showing this. In this image, all of this area here is black, right? So there's nothing distracting, nothing taking away from the overall idea of the photograph. And he's used this light source that's coming in and it's just highlighting the lady's face. And I think that's a wonderful way of leaning into something, which you're going to check on in a second, the geometric forms and shapes, but embracing the shadows to make things stand out. It's so simple and yet so often overlooked. This is also a wonderful example of what's going on here. I love this silhouette that we have here. And again, we will look at silhouettes in a moment, but look at that shape. Nothing in here, once again, has any detail whatsoever. And now it looks a little bit like Lisa Simpson, right? That can distract from the photograph. And this is what makes it work so well. This little highlight here, where it is just a sharp point. Now, whether or not that's with lighting or he's, used some sort of practical way of doing that, I think that sharpness, the way that the shadows are completely defined, it shows an understanding of exactly what it is that he wants to convey and then actually following through on it. This, I believe, is something that's so important to people who are, I think, wanting to go that extra further step with their creativity, is to think about what techniques, what processes that they need to work on to allow them to fulfill that vision. And this photograph is slightly different, isn't it? We look at that, there's still these very big shadow areas where there's nothing going on. And it does help to really center the focus into the face. You know, what's going on here, there's a line that's coming up onto that bit. It's what a wonderful, and this is the whole point. You may look at this and think, do you know what, this looks really simple, so, you know, I could just do that. But this takes thought. It takes thinking about what it is you actually want to achieve and how to go about it in a way that makes it not obvious. In that last photograph, there was a lot of geometric shapes and forms in these images. Now for me, and you know, I grew up in the 80s, and I look at these photographs and they absolutely remind me of that period. But I look at that and I think, wow, what a great way of leaning into something that shows how effective that simple use of graphic shapes can be to, you know, really create something that feels designed. Now you may be looking at this and go, but this feels nothing like a landscape or a street photograph, what have you. But these shapes, these forms are around everywhere. And the reason that I wanted to talk about shape and form with Wolfgang's work is because when you see them plain as day, it makes it a lot easier for you to recognize them when you are out and about. Because it's almost like you've got a little photograph to lay over the scene in front of you in your head to start picking out these shapes and these forms. So let's have a little gander at Wolfgang's work again, because I love it. We're here to look at the photographs. What shape is this lady? Well, you know, she's got this curve going up here. She's put her legs apart, so she's got this kind of teepee action going on. But look at all the arms. They're picked out. Everything is just designed to really reinforce the feeling of a very geometric shape. This, I find, is so important when you're posing people, or if you're looking for elements to use as these, you know, ideas in your photographs, that it helps to have, especially when you're getting started, nothing too, you know, kind of like, oh, going over the top. Just keep it simple. Look for the basics. In Wolfgang's photographs, what I see are kind of the repeated ideas of triangles and circles. This is a great example, but he's made it feel a bit more feminine by having these curves to it. Look at the way this lady's outline is traced around. We still have that triangle that's in the middle here. That's a very solid base. But then there's all these curves. You can see it in her hat and, you know, around here. And it's, of course, it's highlighted by the fact that her hat has those lines on it, you know, that kind of circular motion that's going on there. But I love also the way that it's been broken up. You know, we talked about earlier about that kind of idea of using lighting, very specific lighting, to highlight sections, is that we've got that organic shape to her outline, but then there's this beam of light coming through here. Woof, what a hard beam that comes through, and it runs up her figure and ends in her lips. I mean, this is, you know, I was saying about that 1980s look. This is so 1980s that it hurts. You can almost imagine this being on the wall of somebody who like really into Miami Vice soundtrack in the background. When I look at these photographs, this is what I love about this, that it reminds me of not just that 1980s thing, and I mentioned about the Robert Mapplethorpe idea, but also things like, you know, this reminds me a little bit more sort of like Desiree Doran, Christian Tagliavani. You know, this feels a bit more sort of Renaissance, but we still have what are those ideas that we've talked about in terms of his shape. You know, there's triangles. This is still a triangle here. You know, her whole torso kind of makes into a triangle there. You know, these are little overlooked things. I think when you are trying to put something together is to start at a base. Use the ideas in photography like a building block, that once you have a couple of these concepts as tools in your photographic toolkit, you can start to put them together. We haven't even talked about color, because that's a whole separate thing here. But, you know, his use of color palettes, I think, you know, also shows a very specific approach to how he is thinking about, you know, drawing the attention to the face, of making sure that the background and the foreground elements don't compete against each other but work in harmony. And there's one more lovely element which I just absolutely adore about Wolfgang's work, which I want you to think about what it might be while we talk about frames. I've known about Frames magazine for a while now. Tomasz and Scott, they're wonderful guys. They put a lot of effort into it. This is one of their abiding passions. And you can see it. When you flick through the pages of this, they curate a whole smorgasbord of photographers in here. And as I mentioned, Wolfgang, he came to my attention because of Frames magazine, and they do a lot of the heavy lifting, going out there, finding people, bringing them to us, and they do a wonderful job about keeping photography in print, because print can be a dying art form. So if you'd like to support them, if you'd like to get your own copies in the subscription, this comes to you, I believe it's 4 times a year. It's quarterly. It's a great printed magazine. It's not something that's just run out on poor paper. It feels good. It's it's wonderful quality, and there's something to be said for actually holding a magazine, of paging through, looking at people's photographs, reading about their processes, getting an insight into what they're thinking through the interviews that are also included that. So there's a link in the description box below. Go and check them out. Get yourself a subscription. I know Tomasz and Scott would absolutely love it if you joined the Frames family. So right at the beginning of this, we're talking about heavy and deep shadows, really kind of making something dramatic. And of course, if you take that to the extreme, you end up with silhouettes and negative space. And Wolfgang Gangl, I'm gonna keep saying, I'm gonna shoehorn it wherever I can get. He uses these silhouettes to great effect. I'm sure by now you're starting to see that his work has a very focused, very minimalist kind of look that is free of distractions, and that's what's happening with this use of silhouettes. This photograph, I love this striking idea. This is tapping into that 1980s thing. And look at this hard line that just goes boom straight down there and then takes a little detour going off. Now, I feel it would have been easy for Wolfgang just to go, let's just have this line straight down there. It'd be like that Scarface poster, it's kind of, and maybe this is where he got the idea from, or, gave him some inspiration. But instead of it just being straight down, very angled, very hard, he's doing something with this silhouette. He's using the shape of the lady. There we go. So that sort of breaks up that line, but then it comes out and it gives the impression of a dress. Now, this is something here, like hidden power of both shadows and silhouettes, is everything on this side of the image. Do you know what's there? I don't know what's there, right? It's black. It is free space for our minds to put something into it, to write their own little story here, right? It has her face. Once again, she's lit very specifically. It is just her face, that minimalist feel to it. Now here in this photograph, he's gone the whole hog, right? So all of this is silhouetted, but it's not as deep a silhouette as the one previously. There is some detail here. We can certainly see, right? Oh, look at that. I've got this fancy brush going on there, right? There's detail there. And I think if it were a solid black, then this photograph would just be a little too, well, black and white. It would kind of lack a little bit of something. Whereas the previous photograph that had all the very solid black that we could write in our own stories on here, with this one, I think if it was just that, it doesn't really have the space, because it's just a silhouette of the lady, for us to think about a story in there. But now, of course, you can look at it and think we've gone back to what we were thinking earlier. This space over here is all open for us to put our own ideas in there. We've got that really soft triangular shape that's broken up by the torso. That's a great base. One of the things about this very heavy angular idea on all of his photographs is that these triangles that end up at the bottom of the images, right, they really anchor the photograph. So it's not going somewhere. It doesn't feel like it's moving around all over the place, like it's just about to float off somewhere. It is anchored in space. If you want to create in your photographs that idea that there's stability, that there is something, you know, that things are rock solid, then think about that idea of anchoring your images with a very strong shape that keeps it stuck to the ground. Then you have that circle, which, you know, that breaks up the idea. And you get this because this is all silhouette, because there's a space here that is just not doing anything. So it's allowing the photograph to breathe. It's allowing the subject, our gaze, to interact with each other and ultimately end up with this face that, once again, and I hope that you can see it on the screen, you know, is lit in like a circle. So you end up like this kind of moon shape of the face, but then that angle of these eyes, that sharp line going through them. Wow. Wowee. Wolfgang Gangle. Right? I love these things. None of this is by accident. This is all by design. Think about that word when you create your own photographs. Design. You know, so these are just a couple of the techniques that make Wolfgang's photographs really resonate with me. I love it. You know, he's playing with that light and the shadow. He's got those geometric shapes. He's using silhouettes. He's got, you know, negative space happening. And when you kind of get a hold of these, when you get a grip of using these ideas in your own photographs, it will take your images to the next level. You know, try some of them out. Now, I have a little bit of a quick pro tip here, right, before we go. It's like, when you are working with dramatic lighting, don't look so much about what the light is actually lighting to begin with. Look at what it's creating in terms of shadows. All of these photographs work with the shadows. The shadows are not an afterthought. They are the first thing. Whether you are out in the street, whether you are taking landscape photographs, or if you're in a portrait studio, the shadows are those unsung heroes that are going to make your images absolutely become dramatic. I mentioned Robert Mapplethorpe and his use of lines and shape and graphic elements in his photographs. If you want to check out how he uses them, look at this video over here. Thank you ever so much for watching. It's been an awesome pleasure, and I will see you again soon.